To this point, we've talked about all kinds of read operations using the Node.js driver. Now, let's talk about writing data to MongoDB in Node.js. In particular, we're going to look at the insert1 and insert many methods for collections. Now, for this lesson, I'd like to mix things up a little bit and look at a different type of data. Twitter provides a pretty amazing REST API that is exactly the type of thing that we would use to harvest a bunch of data for some sort of analysis, to, say, test an architecture for a social media application, and a variety of other uses. What I like about the REST API is that it's particularly well suited to a couple of nice examples that'll allow me to illustrate the use of insert1 and insert many in the driver. Now, within this API, we are going to be making use of the status's user timeline endpoint and a portion of the API that allows us to stream tweets on a particular subject as they happen. Now, a detailed discussion of how to use the Twitter API is beyond the scope of this particular class. However, the documentation Twitter provides is excellent, and all you really need in order to get started is a Twitter account and to set up your account with a couple of keys that will allow you to send queries to the API. Now, one thing we're not going to look at, but which is a fantastic part of this API in my opinion, is the fact that I can actually create tweets using post methods to the API. So I can programmatically create tweets, and this is in fact how a lot of websites you see that allow you to essentially tweet about something on their site work. They use the Twitter API to allow you to push content to a Twitter feed from a third-party application. For example, at MongoDB University, we might provide a UI that, with a click of a button, would allow you to push a tweet out that says, "I just completed a homework in M101.js." So let's look now at inserting data into a MongoDB collection using this API. Very briefly, I want to touch on the data model for statuses or tweets and point out that tweets have a date, a unique identifier. Here's the text for a tweet as part of the text field, and then there's a user embedded object that contains the screen name. This is a tweet posted on MongoDB's Twitter handle. And there are a variety of other details in here having to do with media, if there were pictures, and retweets, etc. For purposes of this lesson, we're going to keep things simple. So let's look at an example of using insert1. Now, all of this here is simply me using environment variables that I've set up that contain the keys that I need in order for Twitter to actually allow me to authenticate and pull data. So scrolling down, what I'm doing here is connecting to MongoDB. Note that I'm connecting to the social database. And then with the Twitter client that I created here, I'm going to use this stream method, accessing statuses and filtering using the keyword Marvel. I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and in general Marvel Comics, so I kind of like to see what's being tweeted on those subjects. Now, what we're going to do here in the callback to stream is first log the text of the tweet. Remember that the text field holds the actual, what we consider to be the tweet itself, or the status update. And then we're going to access the statuses collection of our social database, and we're going to call the insert1 method. Now, to insert1, we're going to pass the status. Status is going to be a JSON object of this kind, which MongoDB will readily accept as a document. In the callback for insert1, we'll simply report that we inserted a document and what the inserted ID was. Okay? Now, one thing you may have missed as we went through this is that in the event handler for this call to stream, what we're actually doing here is setting up two event handlers. Okay? The first one is in the event of data, meaning a tweet came in, we are going to actually do this insert. And the second one is, if there's an error, we'll simply throw the error. Okay? So the main job for the callback here is simply to set up these event handlers. This callback will be called every time a tweet is generated that matches this filter term here, Marvel. Okay? So we're keeping our HTTP connection open, and the Twitter API is streaming data to us as it has data that matches our request. So now let's run this thing. Okay, so I connect, and I can see the tweets start to come in. Okay, so now I'll kill this, and let's go in to the Mongo shell and see what we got. So I'm going to use the social database, and what I'll do is query the statuses collection, and we can see that there's quite a bit of data here. And so since the tweets are big, what I'd like to do instead is project out just the text and filter out _ID. Okay, and so we got this Marvel Cleaners tweet, not what we were expecting, but then there are a lot of Marvel Comics related tweets here as well. Okay, and you'll remember seeing some of these stream by as we watched our application run. Okay, so that is an example of insert one using the Twitter NPM module, which relies on the Twitter API. As an exercise to you, the student, you might take a look at getting this code up and running with your own Twitter account. There are pretty good instructions on the documentation for the Twitter package, and as I said, the Twitter API docs are quite good. Okay, so for the second application I want to show you in this lesson, we're going to look at pulling tweets from a set of user timelines that we want to follow, continuing with this theme of Marvel Comics. I'm going to use this as an example of insert many. So we're setting things up again using the Twitter module from NPM. But what I'm going to do here is, rather than stream data to this application, I am instead going to make a GET request to the user timeline endpoint for the API. Now let me talk about the basic idea for this application. So imagine that we're harvesting tweets because what we'd like to do is build up a collection of social network data for some analysis that we're doing. So imagine that we have this app running daily. It kicks off, say, at 6 a.m. every day. And what we're going to do is pull all the tweets in the past day that have been produced by these 3 different screen names. Now, of course, for an application like this, we'd probably have hundreds and hundreds of screen names that we're following, potentially thousands. Or maybe we'd use some other mechanism for acquiring tweets. This is the one we're going to use in this example because it's relatively straightforward. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to loop through each screen name, and I'm going to do a find against my existing statuses collection. So for each of these screen names, I'm going to do a query and sort all the statuses that I have for each screen name and limit to 1. Now here I'm sorting in descending order and limiting to 1 because what I'd like to know is what is the status ID for the very last tweet that I pulled for each of these screen names. Now what that's going to do for me is it will allow me to request from the Twitter API all tweets that have occurred since that particular status ID. So I won't be pulling down any duplicates, wasting bandwidth, and creating some noise in my data set. So having issued this query, we can see that we're pulling in some of what we've learned from earlier lessons. I'll then call toArray on the cursor, knowing that I should just have 1 document, or perhaps 0 if this is the first time I'm running this program. Okay, so the very first thing I do inside the callback for toArray is I check the length of the docs array that's passed in. If it's equal to 1, then I know that I've previously pulled some tweets for that particular screen name. If I haven't, then either this is the first time I'm running the program, or I've, say, just added a new screen name. Okay, the next step here then is I'm going to set up this parameters object because I'm going to end up passing that in my request to the Twitter API. So some of the parameters that are of interest to me here are screen name, because I want to get all statuses produced by this particular user. And then there's this since ID parameter. This is going to allow me to pull all statuses since the last one that I saw for a particular user. And finally, I'm going to specify a count. I'm going to limit the number of statuses I pull from an individual screen name to 10, primarily so I don't hit my limit in working through this example and then showing it to you guys. So here then, if I have in fact pulled statuses for this particular screen name in the past, I'm going to specify my since ID value in addition to the screen name, as well as the count. If I've not previously pulled statuses, or at least there are none in the collection here, then what I'll do is I'll simply leave the since ID off of the parameters object that I'm building here. Okay, so with the parameters object built, then what I'm going to do is use my Twitter client, issue a call to the get method for this client, again, provided in the Twitter NPM package. I'm going to pass the params that I constructed here, and then wait for my callback to be called with all of the statuses that the API is going to provide back to me for this particular screen name. Okay, once I get those statuses back, then I'm going to go ahead and call the insert many method on the statuses collection. Okay, so insert many, much like insert one, functions more or less as we would expect. It so happens that this callback will be passed an array of statuses from the response we get back from the Twitter API. We're going to pass those along to insert many and then execute this callback. Now, this callback does little more than log what happened and then just make sure that we've successfully processed all of the screen names before we close the database connection. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so ran through pretty quickly, and here we get a chance to see some of the statuses we pulled back and the IDs for those statuses as they went into the database. So now we've looked at an example of using insert one to process tweets that come in from the streaming interface to the Twitter API. And we've looked at insert many to process status updates that we've requested in bulk from a variety of different users' timelines. The key takeaway here is that both insert one and insert many function as expected, in that insert one expects to receive a single document as its first parameter, and insert many expects to receive an array of documents as its first parameter. Both of them take a callback that allow us to process errors or the results in some fashion. And the results that we get back in both cases tell us what IDs were inserted, whether it was one ID in the case of insert one or multiple IDs in the case of insert many.